Welcome to SQL or SQL for Absolute Beginners course. This is lesson 1.1, and in this lesson we'll start with the SQL basics, basically introduction to tables. Now, as the name of the course suggests, it is for absolute beginners. So for some of you who might be a little bit familiar with SQL commands and the concept, it may look a little bit easier in this particular section, but please bear with me, because we want to make sure everybody is on the same page and we want to start from ground up. So if you are absolute beginners, don't worry, we'll start from the scratch and then we'll get to the pro level. All right, here we go. So before we actually dive into SQL commands and all, let's understand the basic concept. It is like before we become an engineer, let's understand the basics of a car. If you want to design a car and become an engineer, it's better to understand how the steering works and what's the dashboard and what's the ignition key and things like that, right? So that's what we are going to do in this section. So let's assume that we found a Thomas Edison's phone book, and the phone book is very simple. It contains just two columns, name and phone number, and it has three different rows with each one with some name like Henry Ford, Nikola Tesla, Wilbur Wright, and some phone numbers for each of them. So it looks like a table, so let's call it a table, right? And each of these columns, we can also call them fields. So in plain English, if you have to say that, we can say I have a table which has two fields. Now each of the row is called a record. So let's call this as, if I have to define this, what we see on the screen is we have a table called phone book, and it has two fields, name and phone number, and it has three records. Pretty simple, right? Okay, now let's say we also found another book, which is Thomas Edison's address book. The address book looks like a little bit more columns. Basically it has first name, last name, address, city, and state, and it could have the same name. So it still has Nikola Tesla's name, but it has also its address, and same for Henry Ford. Now in this example, then we can say that we have a table called address book, and it has five fields, first name, last name, address, city, and state, and it has two records. So once we have these, now we end up with two tables, Edison's phone book and Edison's address book. Now if we consider that way, and considering that since you are such a good researcher, you still keep looking for more things, and you found Andrew Carnegie's phone book, and that phone book as well as Andrew Carnegie's address book also now you found. So now we have four different books: Thomas Edison's two books, phone book and address book, as well as Andrew Carnegie's phone book and address book. So if somebody asks us a question that I need or get me all the phone numbers from the phone book, well, now we are in trouble, because we don't know, we are not clear basically that whose book should we use, Edison's phone book or Carnegie's phone book, from where we should get the phone numbers. To identify which phone book, why don't we do this? So we already said Edison's phone book, so let's make it a little bit a change, and let's call it, put a prefix as I would say, and we'll call it, instead of Edison's like apostrophe, we'll call it Edison dot phone book. Similarly, Edison's address book, we'll call it Edison dot address book, and for Carnegie, same thing, Carnegie dot phone book and Carnegie dot address book. So total, now we have still four books, but we are clearly identifying Edison dot phone book, Edison dot address book. So no confusion about which phone book should arise. Each one is called that specific names. So so far if you understand this is very basic concept, it looks like, but this is going to help us define our next journey of whole SQL commands and database system. So I want to just make sure that we all are understanding this basic concept, that all these books that we called can be defined with a prefix, and then we put dot and then the actual name of the book or the table. So if so far it makes sense, let's go to the next lesson, which will be where we'll consider more books about this. So see you in the next lesson.